Hi guys, I'm Anita and I'm back with another video, and today it's time for part 2 of my Stephen King batch review thing. When I started this Stephen King project, I decided that I wanted to do a review, a new video with every 5 books that I read, or every 5 books of his in his publication order that I get through, and talk a little bit about my thoughts about those 5 new books and how I think they are compared to the others that I've read, so that I finally get maybe a new top 5 with the new 5 books that I've read over the past how many months it may take. The 6th Stephen King book that was published was Night Shift. This is the first short story collection, so a lot of these stories had already been published in other anthologies or something, so a lot of people could have read this from those anthologies. It features a lot of stories that has been adapted into movies that I have not watched. This has, I think, 20 short stories in total, so there are quite a lot of stories in here, and I definitely have some favorites and I have some that I didn't enjoy as much. I think that this is a really good collection, and it was interesting seeing Stephen King writing in short form, because horror really works well in short form. And so some of the stories from here that has been adapted has been Cat's Eye, Children of the Corn, and Graveyard Shift. I actually have a full spoiler-free review of this collection on my Goodreads. I will leave a link to that in the description box below so that you can go and check it out. It'll have a few sentences about what this story is, and then a couple of sentences about what I liked about it, whether I liked it or not, and my ratings for each of the stories. The first story in here that I gave it 5 stars was The Mangler. For some reason that really got to me, I think because I've been working at these sort of industrialized places, and that just, yeah. And then I gave The Boogeyman 5 stars as well. I thought it was really cleverly written. And The Lawnmower Man I also gave 5 stars, which was quite an interesting or strange story. And then I have some 4.5 stars that I'd like to give some honorable mentions to. I gave a Strawberry Spring 4.5 stars. There's something about kids taking over a city that just is scary as hell. The Ledge was really interesting. I really enjoyed that one as well. It was 4.5 stars. Finally, Quitters Inc. as well. I definitely am happy that I have never been a smoker, so yeah. So those were my favorite stories in here, but there was a lot of great stories in here that I really enjoyed, and there was a couple there that was like a 2.5 stars and 2 stars and stuff. But for the most of this collection, I gave them either a 4, 4.5, or 5 stars. So I would say that this was a really good collection, and I highly recommend it. And I think the average rating of my entire ratings was like 3.87 or something like that. It's also in my Goodreads. So I decided to round it up to 4 stars, because those 5 stars in here and 4.5 stars in here were really, really good. So yeah, I think that it's a story that needs that 4-star rating for me. The next published work of Stephen King's was The Long Walk by Richard Bachman. This is a story set in Maine, which most of his stories are so far. It's set in a world where we have, every year there's this big competition called The Long Walk that you enter, and then you have to walk from Maine, and then I forgot the destination, I think, but it was a really long walk. That's what I remember. And they had to keep a certain pace during this walk, and if they didn't, they get warnings, like 3 warnings, I think. And if they still didn't keep up with that pace, they would be shot and killed. So it's basically a last man standing thing. So the one that gets to the finish line, usually there's not a whole lot that ends up getting there, because then they get different illnesses on the way. They get infections or something that makes them not able to complete it, and so it will end up then being shot and stuff. So it's a really interesting story about this walk, and I was very enjoying this. I was enjoying this a lot. I think that this is definitely my favorite Richard Bachman novel so far. and I highly recommend this one. If you want to read a Bachman novel, then definitely go for this one. I think this is the best one there is. And yeah, so I end up also giving this a 4 out of 5 stars. I think I really enjoyed it, but it was not a favorite like that, but I still really enjoyed it and I thought it was a really great story. The next one that I read was The Dead Zone by Stephen King. This I also have a full spoiler-free review on Goodreads of, and I would like to link that down below if you want to read about it. But this book follows Johnny Smith. I think his name is Johnny, but he's going by John, so a shorter term. And something happened when he was a kid, when he was on ice skates, and then later on in life he was on a way home from a date. He was in a terrible car accident in a taxi where the taxi driver ended up dying and he ended up in a coma for 4 years. And when he wakes up again, he has some interesting abilities, so to say the least, that he can see visions of the future and also see things about certain characters or people if he touches them or an item of theirs, and he can sort of see, you have this and this daughter at home and sort of like that. This is not one of Stephen King's scary novels. This is not super scary. It's a bit suspenseful and has some moments, but it's mostly a really, really well told story about Johnny and how he's dealing with this new thing that happens, as well as all of the hardships that comes after this accident. He has terrible headaches and he experiences because of he's been in a coma for so long, he has to get some surgery in order to be able to walk properly again, to get his scenes working and all of that, because they have shrunk as he was lying there. And so there's a lot of things that goes into Johnny's character and telling the story, and I just absolutely enjoyed this one. It took me forever to read it because I had some other obligations, but that didn't take away the enjoyment of this book. Every time I picked it up, I was really immersed in the story, and I really, for the first time, saw how good a storyteller Stephen King is. I have really loved The Shining because it was a scary as hell book for me, but this one was just a really well told story that I will never be able to forget again, and I don't understand why it's not more popular around Stephen King's books. I've never heard of it before starting this project, and I'm so happy that I did. So I will be eternally grateful for starting this project just so that I could read this book, because I ended up giving it a 4.5 stars. I really, really enjoyed it and highly recommend everyone checking it out. I think the most important thing to know when going into this is that it's not a scary book, so you're not going to get that horror feel. Maybe that's why it's not been so popular, because people expect it to be horrific when they get into a Stephen King book, but this one is not one of those. But I don't think that you should skip this just because of that, because this is such a great story and I loved it. The next thing that I finished was Firestarter by Stephen King. This is a story that follows a project gone wrong, if you will. There's this man and woman who becomes part of this secret project, but something goes wrong which gives them some psychic type of powers that they have suddenly. One of them is telekinesis, I think, and the other one, what was her power? I don't remember. But they get married, they fall in love, get married, and they have a baby, and that baby has some powers that can set things on fire at will, which is why it's called Firestarter. So we end up following this in two perspectives. We follow the dad of the girl, and we follow the girl who is like 8 years old, and as they are becoming separated in the story because she is taken hostage, taken in to try and control her so that she doesn't accidentally set the things on fire, because they know they've done something wrong, but yeah. I think this was a really interesting story. I enjoyed the majority of it. I think that the perspective from I forgot her name, the girl's name, but that was really great. I think Stephen King really writes child characters really well, and I think this is the first time I've seen it since Salem's Lot that he uses a younger child as Shining comes after Salem's Lot. Sorry. Salem's Lot and Shining had Danny and forgot his name. But in those, the child characters are really well done, and in this one, the child character is really well done. I think that he really knows how to get into the mindset of those kids, what scares them, what they don't understand, and all of that, and I just enjoy that. Overall, it was a little underwhelming, so I end up on a 3.5 stars, but I still enjoyed it for the most part. And the last and final book for this round is Roadwork by Stephen King, which is by Richard Bachman, which is the 3rd Bachman novel published under that name. And a lot of the Bachman novels was written during Stephen King's college years, I think. And so I think in some of these books it shows that it's kind of older stories, and this one for me is just my least favorite Stephen King book that I've read so far. I don't see the point of this book. I don't understand where Stephen King wanted to go with this. This follows a man who also has his own company, his thing. One day he is being told that he needs to move out of his home and let go of his work because they are going to build do some road work, new part of the interstate or whatever you want to call it. So a new highway road thing. So it follows him after he's finds out about this, but he also has some issues from earlier that he hasn't really dealt with. He lost his son to cancer a couple of years ago and never really dealt with it because of reasons. But the overall plot of this it didn't really sit well with me. I don't think that it had a purpose, and I really didn't enjoy this book at all. I didn't understand the motivations to what happened. So I ended up giving this a 2 out of 5 stars. This is definitely my least favorite Stephen King book so far, and hopefully there won't be a lot more of those. But yeah, so that's why I say if you want to read a Richard Bachman novel, go for The Long Walk, because that is a really good, great, well-told story. I also enjoyed Rage for the most part, but I still think that The Long Walk is definitely the better of the ones that I've read so far. I still have a couple left. I don't remember how many he wrote on the Bachman name, but yeah. Let's get to my new top 5. How has it changed? What does the new top 5 contain? First of all, I'd like to actually add, because it's the only short story collection so far, I would like to add Night Shift to be number 5 on this list, because I really enjoyed some of those stories in there, and I really enjoyed this collection as a whole, and I think that because it's a short story collection, it deserves to be here, because amongst the other 4 stars, this is definitely the one I want the most to be here. And then I want The Long Walk to be on the 4th position, because I really enjoyed that one. It's my favorite Bachman novel, and I think it deserves a spot on this top 5 so far. Also because that it was definitely a really fun ride. Coming in as number 3 is going to be Salem's Lot by Stephen King, because I really enjoyed this. This is a really, really good vampire horror novel. Really well told. It's quite long, but I enjoyed this immensely when I read it. And definitely think it deserves the 3rd spot on my top 5. Coming in as number 2 is probably not super surprising considering my video today, but that is going to be The Dead Zone by Stephen King. I really enjoyed this, and I think it deserves the 2nd spot here, because I just love this story, and it was I actually cried a couple of times while reading this, and I did not expect that to happen with a Stephen King book. So yeah. And finally, the only 5-star rated books that I've read of Stephen King so far is still The Shining. So The Shining still is on top of this top 5, and still a really scary book, and I can't wait to one day reread this at the same time that I did in December, because this is such a great winter December read, because it's set over those winter months, and I actually believe that it was set around Christmas, but I'm actually unsure about that right now, but definitely looking forward to getting back to this one at some point. So those are my thoughts about the next 5 Stephen King books that I read. Let me know in the comments down below about any Stephen King books you've read. Have you read any of the ones that I've talked about today? What are your thoughts about them? Which ones are your favorites so far? Do you agree with any of the things that I've been saying? And definitely let me know about that. So if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the next video very soon. Goodbye!